Hi there, I'm Danny Thompson. Welcome to my lair, a place full of twisted dreams and sweet nightmares. And don't let the bedbugs bite.
Right, thank you, Danny. And speaking of Danny, we've got some news regarding our very talented actress, model, and various other talents. Do you want to tell us about that one, John?
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't know a vast amount about it, but I know Danny has been working on a debut album, and we'll put links up for that. But debut album is called Vamp. There are some explicit lyrics, so don't listen in front of anybody who might be easily offended. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be interesting to have a listen to that and see. We're actually using one of the songs, Blood Red Moon, on the film that we've done with her called Blood Red Moon. No, Bad Moon Rising, even. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so it's quite rocky. It's quite good. It's quite interesting. Danny can sing very well, so it's really cool to hear that. And
Although she wouldn't admit it herself.
no, she probably wouldn't admit it, but I would say yeah, she does do that. And track listing wise, there's stuff like Dominatrix, X-Rated, and Whip Me. So I don't know if that's a kind of Devo cover or something. Whip Me Good. But anyway, yeah. So we'll keep you posted on that, and like I say, we'll put some links in that, and hopefully it'll be good to see how that goes. So.
Yeah, I've heard snippets from a few of the songs, and yeah, it's pretty good production value on there. It's well produced. It's kind of got a goth rock kind of feel to it. So if you're into that sort of goth emo stuff, definitely check that out.
Definitely kind of like a pop. I think Danny's a massive Kylie Minogue fan, so there's this kind of slight pop edge to it as well. So
yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so this episode is the Halloween episode, and so what better to talk about in the world of horror than John Carpenter's Halloween?
Oh, hail John Carpenter!
Oh, hail to at the altar.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So, yeah, obviously, I mean, you could say this is the film that started it all, really. And so I kind of went back, and it's been a while since I've seen it and rewatched it. I have to admit, it was as good watching it again as it ever was. One thing that I've always liked about it is that it's incredibly well made. It's also shot, interestingly enough, with anamorphic lenses. So there's
back and watch.
Yep. So you can, if you're interested in what anamorphic lenses are, we've already done a little chat about that. So we'll put links down below. Yeah. But that again, it gives it a great cinematic look. It looks good for a low budget independent horror film, which is kind of what it is. It looks good, and it plays to its strengths. Firstly, I'd say it's even though it's simplistic in some ways, and there is some stuff in it which is a little bit, I'd say, a little bit silly, perhaps at points. But at the same time, it's intelligently made, and the plot, the story develops, well. It does its thing. It obviously lays the groundwork for pretty much every single slasher type movie that's to come after it, which we'll chat about a bit further.
Yeah.
I was going to say as well, there's some nice little bits in it that are also it's kind of got that air of a filmmaker who gives nods, like Hitchcock used to do, stick himself in there or have little kind of Easter eggs as such. There's some great Easter eggs. One obviously is a premonition, a foreshadowing, which is a nice little word, of what to come for John Carpenter himself, which is they are watching The Thing from another world, all the way through it, and obviously he then went on to make the thing. So that's quite cool, and it sits quite nicely as well, because it's kind of on Halloween night you sit and watch horror films, and that's exactly what they're doing. And even the kids are sitting and watching horror films. You know, it's part. It gives that air of Halloween. A second little thing that I was going to mention, just out of interest, and it kind of gives a nod to why, you know, John Carpenter, I respect him and stuff like, and his intelligence and that. In one of the opening scenes, there's Jamie Lee Curtis is on the phone, and she's standing right next to a massive poster for an artist called James Ensor. And James Ensor was famous for his kind of macabre paintings of people in masks. And it is, again, a foreshadowing, really, but a very, very subtle one, and one that you wouldn't even know, really, to what's happening. Now, I'm assuming John Carpenter was in full control of what was happening, so that is a very sort of nod to what's about to happen, and principally this idea of the mask within the entire film.
And the mask, which is William Shatner, right?
Yes, yeah, it's William
But,
Shatner.
I think everyone knows that by now, don't they? That the effects guy just saw a Captain Kirk William Shatner mask in a joke shop and bought it and painted it white and pulled out some of the hair, and that's Michael Myers' face. William Shatner,
which is great. You know, I mean, like, watching it again and watching the use of camera, how he laid this groundwork for this idea of using the background and the foreground. So you had loads of shots, which sometimes feels a little bit silly. It's just, Jamie Lee Curtis, will you please pay attention to the guy that you've only just kind of killed a second ago, who's in the background? I mean, there's that great shot where she's kind of sitting there and, it's all over and done with now. Phew, we're all done. And then he just kind of sits up in the background. And
when we just see his face emerge through the shadow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's that, with that one as well. Yeah, so there's some great reveals and clever reveals and kind of technically, you know, well done reveals, using kind of what's going on in, you know, the contrast between what's happening in the background and the foreground. There was we're going to have to talk about the music as well. I mean, the music is obviously iconic, and also very well used. The first time that Jamie Lee Curtis stabs Michael, and he does tend to get stabbed quite a bit and die or whatever, and then suddenly come back again.
And he gets shot at the end, and then
obviously
gets up and runs
spoilers,
off.
But and
shot, falls through a window, falls like 2 stories to the floor, and then just gets up and leaves.
Can you spoil this film? Can you spoil Halloween? The fact that there's about 20 sequels after, so it's just like, maybe he survives the first one. So so musically, there's great. It was interesting to see that the first time she stabs him, the music keeps going. It keeps having this ominous thing. So you kind of like, something's still wrong. And then the second time, when she's in the cupboard and she stabs him and he dies, the music stops. And it's not ominous anymore, and it's just silence. And it was quite an interesting contrast, because it kind of flipped your feelings, and it's just like, okay, well, maybe this is over with, you know, there's no music telling me that this is still an ominous kind of thing going on. So yeah, like from the technical point of view, editing, camera, and all that sort of thing, it's a brilliant thing. Going back to like the kind of simplicity as well, I kind of view it as a bit of a morality play, a morality tale, and this isn't obviously a new idea, but all the characters who have sex and do drugs and stuff all die. And Jamie Lee Curtis is our innocent character, almost representing innocence. They comment on her intelligence, like she says that you know, boys don't fancy her because she's too intelligent, all this kind of thing. She's that kind of pure innocent American character, I guess. And obviously, spoilers, but she survives. So it's quite, again, that's quite a simple concept, notion. There's not a huge amount of plot in a way, although there is maybe under the surface. And obviously with the expansion of all the sequels and stuff, they obviously do build up. But it is literally, you have the very thin basis of this character, and it kind of jumps straight into it, really. That you never, the interesting thing is they introduce the fact that the asylum has basically been broken. Well, basically is open, and all the people are, all the mad people are running around. But the fact that they drive up to it, they never go into it. They never. There's no like 10-minute sequence at the start of it of them going in and chatting to Michael and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't build it up like that. It's pretty much straight into it, and it kind of relies on dialogue and just a sense of foreboding. It's obviously raining, it's lightning, and you've obviously got Donald Pleasance just being awesome. So it's quite simple. It's very quick. Gets into it straight away. Builds up the characters almost whilst the terror's going on, in a way, whilst the horror's happening. The character building is probably more from actions.
Well, they do a very good and concise job of establishing Michael Myers' backstory, don't they? You see the incident as a child. He's clearly a disturbed child. He's already done murder as a child, murders his sister or his whole family or whatever. Then you know that he's lived the rest of his life in a mental asylum. You know from the reactions of Donald Pleasance's character, like how dangerous he is, because he's very anxious about the whole thing, about this man being loose, and you know what the havoc that he's about to wreak. And you get all that in just like a couple of short scenes.
So
it establishes the character very quickly, and you don't really need to know more than that.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's like if you probably was given more information and stuff, which is probably where the other films start to, you know, lose their way. You overload. The audience is given the right amount of information. And yes, you're right. The opening sequence, again, the iconic sequence, really, does set the tone, set the horror as well. I mean, it's always, I don't want to use the phrase interesting, but it's always a kind of thing where, you know, children are not innocent. And in this, you obviously have this portrayal of this, I think he's 6, isn't he? Or whatever, 6-year-old kid who's just murdered his sister type of thing. And also it is generally quite a funny film as well. There's a few bits in it, like Donald Pleasance is brilliant. There's some little things like that opening sequence has possibly, you don't see anything, but also possibly the shortest sex scene in the world, in which they go upstairs, and in about a minute, Michael gets a knife, and then the boyfriend leaves. It's just like that poor girl, you know. Yeah, literally, yeah. And that's a long time. I don't know.
Yeah. So you mentioned the many sequels there, and it spawned a lot of sequels, but it's also spawned a lot of clones. I don't know if it was the first slasher movie. I don't know what has come before that. I mean, the original Cape Fear, would that be classed as a slasher movie? I don't know.
I think.
I mean, he's not slashing people up with knives, but it's the stalking, menacing bad guy, isn't it? It's a similar kind of concept.
I think it's probably regarded as the one that started
Yeah,
slasher genre, but it's
yeah,
not the
yeah,
first one. I mean, I can think of things like Peeping Tom,
yeah.
which essentially is a slasher movie. Frenzy, which was Hitchcock. There's lots of films that, but they're quite isolated. You know, they're sort of one-offs. This started the slasher kind of genre, and more so, this started the concept of studios going, we can make a lot of money, and these films are very easy to do, and as long as we tick all the boxes of, you know, a bit of nudity and violence and stuff, and you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of cliches there, isn't there? Because obviously the other big one is like Friday the 13th. It's high school kids or college kids, whatever they are, at a summer holiday camp, and then the murderer stalks them and kills them all, and it's an opportunity to see lots of teenage girls in their underwear.
And Kevin Bacon, if I remember
Is
right.
Kevin Bacon in it?
Kevin Bacon is in the first one, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. He gets killed with an
It's been a
arrow
long time since
through
I've
the
seen
neck.
it. Okay. And then that just became like the thing, like, you know, it just became a cliche, didn't it? Nearly every film followed that same, you know, slasher movie followed that same pattern. And whether it's at a holiday camp or it's on a campus somewhere, there was another one that was basically a complete rip-off of Friday the 13th called, I think it's called The Burning.
Yeah, there's a burn, yeah.
And the killer uses like hedge trimmers.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, he was the you know, the caretaker at a holiday camp or something like that. And then obviously you've got not Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, which is a slightly different take on it, but it's college kids or high school kids.
Johnny Depp.
Yeah, Johnny Depp. Yeah. Doesn't he get splattered all over the ceiling?
Yeah, he disappears into the bed, and then there's an eruption of blood.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you're right. And I think it's this kind of notion of, and having been involved in slasher films myself, and with Danny as well, we did a film called Serial Caller, which was basically a slasher movie. There's elements in there. So, for instance, you tend to have a variation on the concept. So, for instance, Serial Caller, it was the kind of phone sex line type thing, and that was the location. That's kind of where you did it. And then essentially just kind of runs its gambit of how many interesting ways can you kill people. Again, that's a dreadful phrase, really, but that's kind of what these films are about. It's just like how, you know, what interesting and different ways can you dispatch so and so and make it horrifying. And obviously that launched the careers of people like Tom Savini and stuff, who then, you know, who became you know, gods of makeup and ways of killing people.
You know, they're very cliched. I've got to be honest, I'm not a big fan of slasher movies because they're mostly rubbish. And as you say, it's just murder porn, and that doesn't really excite me. You know, like with John Carpenter's Halloween, as you said at the beginning, it's a well-made film, and it creates atmosphere and tension, and it does tell a story. It's not a very complicated story, but it does tell a story, and it does have, you know, like a subtext in there as well, as you said, about the morality tale that's going on within it. You don't get that with a lot of the other slasher movies. It is literally just, you know, murder porn. It's like a bunch of set pieces that are just filler until you get to see the next horrific murder scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think an aspect of that is because people realize that you can make them very cheaply and very quickly and churn them out, and thus not so much thought goes into it. Halloween benefited from being probably one of the first ones, and setting the tone. If it had been, if it had been one of the ones further down the line, say Friday the 13th was the first one, it might be a lesser film for it. I think it does live up to its mantle well, and that side of it. But yeah, interestingly, with the kind of Halloween series, there is a huge amount of sequels. There's reboots, not remakes, reboots, which I suppose is an important distinction to make. Carrying on the, what's your opinion on? Have you seen many of them? Is there any?
I've seen a few of the Halloween sequels. What was the one that had LL Cool J in? Was that?
That was H2O.
That's H2O. Yeah. It wasn't. Just didn't think it was that good. They're all just cheesy.
Well, that was written by the.
Yeah. I've not seen any of the reboots. I don't want to see any of the reboots because they're not going to improve on the original. But having said that, I'm intrigued now, so I might watch the what's the one that you're going to mention.
Yeah, so I was going to just mention that obviously reboot wise, Rob Zombie did Halloween and Halloween 2. They kind of get slated, from my knowledge. I mean, I'm sure there's people who like them, and it's whether you're much of a fan of Rob Zombie. He's made some interesting stuff. I'll give him that. I'm not always a massive fan. I think sometimes the production's a bit.
I wish you'd just stick to making music because.
True. White Zombie's
La Sexorcisto is one of my favourite heavy metal albums of all time.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Yeah.
But, so I've seen those and I just wasn't that particularly interested. I have to admit, I did watch the one that came out 2018, Halloween, which was a reboot, and Jamie Lee Curtis is back in it as the grandmother. So she's basically reprising the character. So it does kind of work quite well in that it does further the storyline. It's quite well done. Interestingly written by a bunch of people. The director, Jeff Fradley, I'm not too sure who that is, but Danny McBride is an executive producer and wrote it. And Danny McBride, if you know him, I loved him on Eastbound and Down. And
okay, this you're gonna like. We got this.
Honey, I love you. I think you're a terrific girl, but you have clothes like a fucking dickhead.
And stuff. And he was probably one of the most entertaining things out of Alien Covenant.
He's one of the most entertaining things about anything he's in.
Yeah. He's awesome. So, and that's a Blumhouse one, interestingly, as well. So we should definitely chat about Blumhouse at some point in future podcasts. Yeah. So it was, again, well done, well made. It was quite an interesting. It definitely pushed the story forward. Maybe it's left itself open, possibly for next versions of it. And to be honest, with Halloween, it doesn't really matter if Michael dies at the end anyway. They just resurrect him. It's that simple, and they've done it numerous times. But I think in H2O they cut his head off, and then he's back again at some point. So, but we was going to mention probably the anomaly in the whole.
Yeah, so there is an anomaly in the series, the Halloween series. So obviously Halloween 1 and 2 were directed by John Carpenter. Every other Halloween film is, different director, different producers, I think, but they're all about Michael Myers in some way or other, apart from Halloween 3, which has nothing to do with Michael Myers or any of the other films whatsoever. Season of the Witch. And I don't know if John Carpenter had any involvement in that, because it's got some familiar faces from John Carpenter films, and it's got a very John Carpenter look and feel about it.
Yeah, I know there's a whole backstory to what happened to that,
Mm.
and I think it's quite a long, convoluted one. It's worth watching. But yeah, I think it was kind of hijacked, and it was almost like the studio wanted to attach the Halloween name because they thought that would sell lots of things. Having said that, I actually always really liked it, and in some ways, weirdly, I mean, if you took the Halloween name off of it, I think it still would be quite an interesting, good film. And there definitely was some pretty, like, watching it when I was a kid type thing, or younger. The bit like with when they put the jack-o'-lantern heads on.
When they put the mask on and they watch the TV thing and their heads just
There's
like worms and
There's always like, oh
their
god.
head. I thought that was horrific when I watched that. I don't know how old I was when I saw it, but it was one of the first horror films that I watched as a young man or as a child that actually horrified me. And I think it's criminally underrated. I'm just looking at it on IMDb. It's got 4.9 out of 10, which is a crime. I think it's a much better film than that. And
I'd agree.
Yeah, Tom Atkins is the main guy, who is the main guy in The Fog, wasn't he?
Yes, he is. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the problem is that it's got the name Halloween 3 attached to it.
Yeah,
and so a lot of people are like, what the hell was this?
It's almost like we were talking about with the Ratched thing. Like, I said they should have come up with just an original character, and it's almost as if they felt they had to attach it to an intellectual property. And it's the same with Season of the Witch. It's like the studio, there was no way they were going to be able to distribute Season of the Witch, on the strength of itself for whatever reason. So they just attached it to the Halloween. Maybe that was the plan, that they were going to turn the Halloween franchise into a series of different Halloween-based horror movies. I don't know, but
yeah, we should definitely look further into this. Yeah, but it's. I mean, I would say the first 3 are worth a watch.
Yeah,
if you like your slasher films, watch the other ones, but they are just silly nonsense.
Yeah,
really. And the reboot, the 2018 reboot, is worth a watch. Just to more out of interest as well, just to see what they do. And Jamie Lee Curtis is always good.
She's really good
with the character, and they play with the character as you would expect it. That again, she's been through this terrible thing, so she's not a particularly likable character. She's she's almost like she's a strong character, but her strengths are kind of are not ones that you would particularly like in a person. It's almost like if you want to live a normal life, you don't want this paranoia and gun-toting whatever, and it's quite an American thing, I guess, and probably quite prevalent today with the amount of militia. She's almost a militia type thing, but there's a very definite reason why she's like that, as opposed to being a bit mad.
Well, she's more than just a damsel in distress in it, isn't she? Like you said, she seems to be like the moral fibre of the film. She's this upright, upstanding, almost kind of virginal, bookish kind of character who thinks, seems to act like she's morally superior to all her friends because she's not having sex with everyone, and she's got a strength of character, but she's not necessarily like a physically strong character.
And
but at the same time, she's not just a damsel in distress. She's not just there to be rescued.
Yeah, she's definitely one of these strong female characters that always good. You Ripley, for instance, that and are much more interesting and good as well. It's good to see this side of things. So
yeah, but then at the same time, she's still fallible. Like she's scared shitless throughout the whole thing, as you would be.
Yeah.
It's not like she's just infallibly strong and resilient. She's scared for her life, and everything she's doing is just almost out of blind panic. But she's strong enough to get through it.
Yeah, and I suppose there is that notion. It's just like if you are in that situation. I mean, she is right in a way as well. I mean, it's never openly said, but her paranoia is probably correct and potentially is what saves. In fact, the people who don't really believe her tend to die, and the ones who kind of come around a little bit to her way of thinking tend to survive. So it's quite interesting. Again, it's kind of that notion that, I mean, sometimes these things should have ambiguously moral endings or tones to them. I'm not a big fan of the kind of everybody lives happily ever after type endings type thing, or clear cut, like this person's good and they're bad, the other person's bad type thing, kind of thing that we've seen. So these films are always, when well done, they're always a bit more. There's a bit more to them. They're a bit, they ask questions as well. They pose questions.
It's interesting as well. You mentioned like other strong female protagonists, and from that era, another film that is, in many ways, there's a lot of similarities and parallels between that and Halloween, but is a very alternative take on. It's not technically a slasher, but it's an alternative take on that, because you have the indestructible stalking bad guy, and then you have the female protagonist who's running for her life. And
I know what you're going to say. I think I know which one you're going to say.
Yeah, so Terminator.
Yeah.
And Sarah Connor is the Laurie Strode in that. She's just thrown into this situation, and she kind of is the damsel in distress, but she's not just there to be saved. She ends up kind of defeating the Terminator in the end, in a similar way to how Laurie Strode defeats Michael Myers at the end of Halloween. And it's just out of pure desperation, and it's a fight for her life.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's kind of, I mean, I don't know, but I wonder how much Ripley, for instance, was, although who came first? Laurie, 78 is Halloween. I think Alien 79. Possibly.
Yes, that rings a bell. Sounds about right. I don't know who which was first out of them. I think personally 79. I saw 79, right. I think I saw Alien before I saw Halloween personally, but
so I'm wondering, I mean, whether it had that much influence, but I don't doubt Laurie Strode must have, like Halloween, from that point of view, having a strong female character. I mean, she becomes stronger. She survives. I'd say she survives in the first one. It's not that she's not the one who kills Michael Myers. No, well, nobody kills Michael Myers, but and she's in some ways saved by Donald Pleasance, which again is whether there's a whole thing of that he is this kind of fatherly figure. The male. It's not like a prince has rode in and saved her. She's saved by a kind of fatherly figure within this,
because we need the patriarchy to save the day.
Yeah, exactly. So
so this is a terrible film, and we should never watch it because
exactly. We've completely changed our mind now. So,
but yeah, so it's also like it became kind of recurring theme in some of John Carpenter's films, like having these strong female characters. Obviously, in The Fog, you've got two of them with again Jamie Lee Curtis and Adrienne Barbeau, are like the two kind of main protagonists throughout that, and they're both very strong in their own way. And Prince of Darkness, even I forget the actress's name, but you know the day is eventually won by the female lead in that. And even in Escape from New York, there was, you know, all those supporting characters. Again, Adrienne Barbeau in that was quite a strong supporting character. Helps to Snake Plissken to win the day.
Yeah. I mean, he did give, you know, his female characters, which is great. You know, I always think that's, well, not necessarily has to be female, but it's always good to have well-rounded characters and not them just to be there. If anything, you could say that his female characters, and I'm thinking also about the ones who obviously are killed. They're not fully one-dimensional. They're not. I wouldn't say they're three-dimensional. They're probably 1.52 dimensional in their characters. They do try and give them some sense of stuff in there to do and that. But yeah, I think he understands that when we were talking about the Ratchet in one the videos before, likable characters. He does give his characters some sense of likableness or characterization, so that you do care. Hopefully you care when they are actually dispatched, type thing. So
yeah. Okay. Anything else?
No, I think that's it really. I mean, obviously, happy Halloween to everyone. No one.
Are you going to go trick or treating?
Well, I've been trick or treating for about, I don't know, 30 years or something.
I don't think I've ever been trick or treating.
I'm sure I did as a kid.
My mum would never let me. She always used to say, "You're not doing that. It's a stupid American idea."
Yeah,
Legalize begging. That's what she used to say.
I mean, I kind of like the idea of it, but yeah, it's a kids thing. So yeah, I've got no interest in it, and obviously. I don't think it should be happening anyway at the moment until this.
And there'll be no fancy dress parties or anything like that. So this is it. This is your Halloween, watching us chat shit on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
So
just when you thought it couldn't get any more depressing.
Yeah. So with that said, we're going to wrap this up because we've been waffling long enough and you're probably bored to death now. So happy Halloween. If you're in America, happy holidays, because I think it's a bank holiday over there. It's just another day of the week over here. And be good, and we'll be back soon. Later.
Yeah, cool. Take care.